Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights, international episode with Julien Chiron from France. He's wrote a book about 5 years ago, and he's got another book coming out about the state of the hobby, but it turns out it's going to wind up being about Panini. He's done a lot of interviewing, and I was delighted to be part of that process. Thanks, Julien, for letting us know what's going on over in Europe. I hope listeners will enjoy this conversation.
I wrote a first book 5 years ago about the hobby in France. The goal of the book was to speak about the hobby from 1991 to 2021, to explain how I felt the hobby, how I collected, and who I met, and the different aspects of the hobby in France. It was very interesting to meet a lot of people, for example, shop owners in Paris, because I live in Paris. And in the 90s, there were a lot of physical shops in Paris. Unfortunately, they closed, and now we don't have true sports cards shops. But yes, it was a hard work, but a very pleasant one, because I used to speak to old collectors and go back to the basics of the passion and the hobby.
But this was your story, your experience, but you were interviewing lots of people?
Yeah. My experience of collector, I wanted to explain how the hobby deployed in France through my eyes, for sure, as a kid, because I'm 43. When I started to collect, I was 12.
Okay.
I didn't live in Paris at the beginning. Coming to Paris, into the shops, into the starting of the convention, it was new, it was huge. Nothing compared to the US, for sure, but it was huge to meet 100 collectors. And through my vision of a young collector growing up with more money and hobby who change with a lot of money, with a lot of new things, I wanted to try to understand how it worked.
But was it mostly soccer or was it basketball? How did that happen over the 30 years from when you started up through 2021, which would be the beginning of COVID?
Yeah. In fact, my first meet with the hobby was basketball, but with trading cards, because before that, through Panini stickers, already collected stickers, soccer, football in France, because it was a huge hobby. We could find anywhere stickers to buy, and it wasn't so expensive. My first step in the hobby was through Panini stickers, and then just after the Olympics Games of 92. Because in France, you had too in the US, but we had some marketing operations through McDonald's. And buying Happy Meal, we had some free packs of trading cards. And it was just after Upper Deck arriving, in fact. Yeah, it was a large deployment with Upper Deck. And I used to speak to the person who worked with Upper Deck in France and in Europe to deploy the brand and to deploy, in fact, the hobby, because there was nothing before. So it was new for everyone.
So do you think a lot of this is about the United States, the dream team?
Yeah.
Michael Jordan, is that a big part of how this got really rolling in the 92?
Yeah. All the kids were crazy just after the Olympic Games, for sure. Every kid wanted to play basketball, not football anymore, not soccer anymore.
Really?
They wanted to play basketball. It was a real change, sport change, and then collectible and collective change. Yeah. But first, yeah. And Jordan, yes, was one of the key for that, for sure. Yeah. We wanted to wear the jersey of Michael, for sure.
23?
Yeah. The Bulls 23, the Cavs coming into the school. And yeah, thanks to McDonald's or not thanks to McDonald's, it depends.
Of the shows at that time, was there one big show every year in Paris, or were there some in other cities, or how did collectors get together back in the 90s?
The first show I found was in 95 in Paris. It was in a very specific place in Paris named Place de la Bourse. Place de la Bourse is somewhere we speak about the back subjects. And outside, there is a place, and 100 or 200 people were there to set up, show what they got, show what they have to exchange. And it was a very new thing because the first shop opened in 1992 in Paris. And at the very top, there were 3 shops in Paris, physical, some more in the south in France, one near Nantes in the west coast. But the convention, as you knew in the US, were very different things.
Yeah.
Maybe in the shops later in the 90s, every Saturday, for example, when kids were available after the school, the shop's owners tried to set up, organize some meetings, but it was maybe 20 to 50 people.
Like a trade night now. They did
Exactly.
trade days.
Exactly. Recently, 5 years ago, we tried to know big convention with trading night, with a huge place for 200 and 300 people to set up, and more than 3,000 people to come. So
Great.
yeah, it was a huge change.
Is that why you're going to do a second book? Because of what's happened in the last 5 years?
To be honest, it's crazy for me. What I see now, I never think about what is happening right now into the hobby in France and into the world. To give you an example, I'm a huge collector of Dennis Rodman. I started to collect him in 95. And a few years ago, I decided to sell some of the cards of Rodman. Huge regret, but before the COVID, I guess for me, the hobby was crashing down, and I'm not a money maker through the hobby, but in my mind, some of the cards with huge value at this moment at their top level. And for sure, the story is everything else. And yeah, it was just the beginning, in fact. In France, not only through sports cards, because there is a huge passion for TCG, for Pokemon, for example,
Yeah.
Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, and new TCG.
But your next book will be more all the sports or just what's going on. Why are you doing a second book? It seems like the first book covered a lot of ground. Is this going to be updating or is it different now? Because the prices have gone up. I understand that. But what else has happened in the last 5 years such that you want to write another book?
At the end of the first book, I wasn't able to meet any people working in France for Upper Deck during the 90s. And it was very frustrating for me. It was a huge work, and a big part of the story wasn't really clear for me. How was it installed? How was it deployed? What did they do, in fact, in France, really?
But mainly Upper Deck and voice, those kinds of things. It wasn't just France. So those people were not available to you or they were no longer there? What was the problem?
The problem is I didn't find any name of people working for them.
Yeah.
Because I work as a journalist to find people as I did it for you. And thanks to you, it was very easy for you, but it's not the case every time. And luckily, one day, 5 years ago, I found a quick video on an archivist French site who speaks about Panini and during the 80s, how they did to print, how they did to sell their stuff.
Yeah.
In this video, we saw some people with their names.
Okay.
I tried some new search and I found one woman to speak with me. After a few calls, she explained me she worked for Panini for 5 or 6 years. And after that, she worked for Upper Deck in France.
Okay. Oh.
She was the first employee of Upper Deck in France.
Yeah.
After that, thanks to her, because she did a lot of the work,
Right.
she gave me new names, she gave me new information, and every time it was more interesting. And I started to write about everything that I didn't find before for the first book. Upper Deck in France, Upper Deck in Europe. But after maybe 6 months, I understand that, in fact, I have a true story about Panini and not only Upper Deck. So I started to write my second book about Panini.
Oh.
Now my goal is to conclude the subject about Upper Deck, because it was a very interesting subject economically, and to understand what they did, how they deployed, and why they finished the activity in France and in Europe.
It's an Italian company, but Panini is going to be for sale as a company this year. And so coming out with a book that has what was going on in the hobby in France and in Europe, especially with lots of references to Panini and Upper Deck, and Flair had some sets in Europe as well. But I think that would be a good time for you to do a book.
Yeah, it's a free advertisement for Panini, because I speak with my heart, and every collector speak with their good memories about opening some stickers packs. I met almost 50 people, maybe 30 old employees of Panini France and from Italy. So I made a true work to get some good memories about the hobby.
Now, this will be in French, or it'll be in English, or?
Yeah, unfortunately in France, maybe English, but not sure, because it's just not so easy, as you know, now to print and to sell paper.
Amazon is a worldwide company that wants to do books, and they have translation services and ebooks and other kinds of things, print on demand. People would be interested in that, even if it was at a higher price, to get it in English. Or plus there's other things that can translate a page at a time too.
That's true, but it's a huge, the first one
That's a pretty thick book. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's very expensive to ship, it's very expensive to print, and the quality of the book, the goal is to have a true nice object.
Absolutely, yeah.
And not only, I guess the PDF format is not enough for this type of book.
It's too large, too many.
300 pages.
And lots of pictures.
And the goal is to keep something and not only consume like we can consume a video very quickly.
You can come back to it, yeah.
Yeah, that's why I tried to reach you. And once again, thank you so much for your time. Because, Beckett in France was very important. It's a monthly magazine.
Yeah.
Because when we met between collectors, it was not possible to not get how monthly with us. And now, when we speak to new collectors, when they begin, sometimes they ask us, but why did you use Beckett Monthly? I don't understand. You didn't have any comps or something like that? No.
We did the comps. We were checking all the comps and then putting it all together and put it in a magazine. But that was just once a month. Now people want every day comps. But Julien, any research I could help you with? Because I was there before 1991, obviously, and I'm still around now. And the hobby has grown. It's become more international. It's been great to see the growth. And France is part of that.
Yeah, I'm really interested to understand if during the 90s you were aware of the international hobby in France. Did you travel around the world to analyze the hobby?
In the 90s, it was mostly North American. So we had Canada, we had the United States, but we did have Scandinavia and Norway and Finland and Sweden translated magazines of hockey. And we certainly sold a lot of basketball magazines in Australia during the 90s. We had an international distributor. I had some employees that went to some of those things, but I didn't go to Europe or Australia. I did go to Japan a couple of times. Japan did have a lot of interest there, baseball for Japan. And there were stores. It was difficult with customs to distribute, but generally there were distributors or importers that figured out how to do it. At one point, we had a lot of business in Australia, a lot of business in Japan, and not as much in Europe. But for hockey in Scandinavia, we had separate translated issues for a few years.
At the beginning of 2001 or 02, I found a Pokemon Beckett Monthly
Yes,
translated in France.
that would have been something we would have done with somebody that licensed the rights to take our magazine, and they would be like a month late because if they changed it to Franks or changed it to French language, but all the other stuff, all the pictures and all the work had been done, it just was a translation. But we didn't do that in-house. We had someone, a publisher in Europe that would, as you're pointing out with your book, they would receive the digital files from us.
Okay.
And then they would take the digital files and edit those for changing the language and then turn it into a magazine or a book. Are the French the same level of collecting passion as the Brits or the Germans or the Italians? Seem like the Italians have the legacy of Panini.
Exactly.
That would be an advantage for the Italians.
Exactly. It's something in the mindset like you have in the US, for sure. In the culture, as you said, we started very low in France about this passion, this culture.
Yeah.
And I often speak about the packaging for basketball because it's my number one passion, but the global packaging with the jerseys, with so the sports goods, the sneakers, and then the trading cards is one very good thing to complete the package of the fan. And it was new for France during the 90s. We didn't have anything before. I'd like to know something about you because your name is famous all around the world in the hobby now. What is your feeling about that? Because, as you said, it's a business, but you didn't start your work for that at the first beginning. As you said, you didn't have the economical vision.
Exactly. I had no goal to make money. I just was a collector. I was a very serious collector. I was an advanced collector. I was a very knowledgeable collector. But I also had a PhD in statistics. And so I had some training for analyzing data, and I could see an opportunity. And I thought I could do this. And I didn't make any money for several years, but then it started doing better, and I kept working hard, and I got more teammates, employees that just did a great job, and it just kept growing. Then at some point, it was time for me to step aside and sell the company to another group, various reasons, but it didn't mean I was going to quit being in the hobby. It just meant I wasn't going to have the responsibility of running a company and being the boss. And I really worked a lot, Julien. I don't even know how the French processed this, but I worked too much.
Yeah.
I needed to go to Paris more. I've been to Paris a couple of times, but I was working too much. So to step back and have a chance to do more things and still participate in the hobby, which I do. I've never quit on that. But when you have a lot of employees, they have to get paid and we have to keep putting out products. It wasn't just every month. It was every week. We had some.
Yeah, it's stressful all the time.
Very stressful.
Did you bring by yourself the grading service? Were you still in the company at this moment?
Yes. In fact, I've said I was the last one in the company to say we should do this because employees were saying we should do this. PSA was already doing well. And they said, we could do that just as well or better than they can. And I said, yeah, but we're busy with the price guides and all the books in the magazines and all these other things we're doing. So finally, I thought, yeah, actually, we can do this. And we could do it in a way that we thought would be better. So, yeah, I was all involved in that, but lots of people working very hard on that, really for about 2 years before we announced it and went public with the service, because we had patents for the holder, had to be a different holder, the system for how we were grading. So we got all the intellectual property lined up, and we were hoping to be different, better. And our grading was very well received right from the beginning. People really liked our approach, the way we did it, and it was very successful for us.
Yeah, because in fact, you bring something new with the notation
Exactly.
on the corners,
Yeah.
the surface, etc. And it was very appreciated by the collectors for sure.
And Julian, the other thing people have pointed out is that back in the 70s and 1979 even, and 78, I was consolidating the different thoughts people had about what the grading scale should be in terms of words. It wasn't numbers in those days. This is before PSA, but what is a mint card? How can you describe it in words?
Mhm.
And the same thing with a very good condition or excellent. There were several opinions about that. And one of the things I always did in my magazines and books, I would try to take the diverse opinions out there and try to bring them together into some consensus. What could people agree on? So then every year we would publish the grading standards. I'm sure PSA, when they got started, they used those standards. BGS, when we got started, we used those standards. If you go by the words, that's what it means in terms of the defects and things like that. But now everybody wants to just look at the number. And that's simpler. So grading was always part of what I was doing and what our company was doing, but we didn't start at the grading aspect for 15 years.
For the future of the hobby, grading will lead the hobby still for the next years. And we won't go back to the raw cards, touching the cards, collecting and putting them in a binder.
That the hobby is much more international now suggests that grading is more important because of transporting cards and being able to sell digitally and on these other platforms. Back when I was a little boy, collecting was a neighborhood activity with my friends that lived in the same town. So I wasn't mailing anything. But if you're going to mail cards, which is uncertain, admittedly, then having them graded is some additional protection. So I think grading is here to stay, but there's certainly opportunities for cards that are not graded. That's why at a card show or at a card shop, you have an opportunity to feel the card, to pick it up, to say, I want this card. But then you have to evaluate the condition based on your own eyes. And more people are doing that. Even grading is evolving in the sense that people look at the grade on the card, but they also should look at the card itself and say, I know the grade says 7, but it looks nicer than that, or it doesn't look that good. Going back to my point about the words may be technically true and the number may be accurate, but it's not like a work of art in terms of a painting in one sense, but in another sense, you're looking at it and connecting with the card in terms of the quality of the photo, of the registration, of the centering, any stains on the surface. Like now, if they're on the back, that doesn't bother people very much, but it bothers the graders. So it could get a low grade because it has a problem on the back of the card. A lot of people, when they see it, they say, that looks good to me. I want to buy that one. That's international, but grading provides the technical evaluation of the card and puts it in a slab, and that is a valuable service. But it's not the end of the story. It's a good place to start the story in terms of figuring out what you want to pay. But grading is here to stay. Grading has helped the growth of the hobby, of the industry.
The man in the house of cards is doing all right.